Are you ready to do life together with your sisters? In today's part 2 episode, Janine and I discuss starting your own Jesus People Sisterhood Community support group. Imagine having a group of sisters around you to help in times of need and to celebrate with you in times of joy, or just spending time together through the mundane tasks of life. Well, today's episode is for you. We'll share practical suggestions on creating a group framework and establishing a safe group culture that loves, supports, and builds up its members. We'll give tips and tricks for making it successful and running smoothly.
Welcome to the Jesus People Sisterhood Podcast, a place where Christian single women aged 50 plus connect. I am your host, Janine Jordan, a Christian confidence coach and leadership mentor in Alberta, Canada.
And I'm your co-host, Ellie McCormick, a Christian longevity coach and mentor in the USA. Being single women over 50, we know what it's like to feel overlooked, to have unrealized dreams, to experience the challenges of singlehood, and to be concerned about what our future will look like. We couldn't find anything online for single Christian women over 50, so we created Jesus People Sisterhood just for you, a place where sisters encourage and empower one another through the last third of life, because you are a treasure trove of wisdom and of exceedingly great value. This is an authentic community, a supportive family, with other women on the same journey where Jesus is the center of it all. Here you will find real talk, real community, and real sisters.
Join us as we discuss building relationships, whole health, and growing spiritually. We'll review helpful books and articles, chat with guest speakers, share success stories, and have some laughs along the way. So grab your favorite beverage and we'll get started. Hello, sisters. Welcome to part 2 of Start Your Own Jesus People Sisterhood Community Support Group. If you haven't listened to part 1, please go back and listen to that episode first. You'll hear Therese Spina's testimony of how a single Christian women's group changed her life. Ellie wanted to interview her friend Therese to give you a picture of what a support group might look like. But before we get further into the discussion, Ellie, do you want to do a quick review of your interview with Therese for us?
Okay, so I definitely want to share. I took notes from the interview because she had some really great nuggets that she shared, and I wanted to hold on to those. So one of the things that Therese shared was that this group did life together. And she said they were knit together by God. It was God's group, and they committed themselves to transparency and loving one another. I love that. She said if there were any issues, they talked about them. The group itself filled so many needs and healed the members in so many ways. They had deeper relationships in this group. So it wasn't like these surfacey relationships. I think she gave some example of like go to church and you say, hi, how are you? And you say, fine. And the other person says, oh, I'm good. And that's it. You don't get any deeper. It was not that type of group. It wasn't that type of relationship. And one of the things that I loved, and I wrote it down, was she said they were loving each other back to wholeness, which I love that. Those were the nuggets that I think expressed what the vision for a Jesus People Sisterhood community group is. It's not another Bible study. It's not another small group. Not that there's anything wrong with those, right, but this is a support group. This is a group where we're sisters, we're together, we're family, we're doing life together. We are supporting one another. We are vulnerable. We are transparent. We are loving. We are loving one another to wholeness, right? We are healing one another. We're there for one another. And it's got to be the family that we need, the coming around and being there for one another. That is the vision for a Jesus People Sisterhood group.
Right.
If you want to go ahead and talk about the framework, I could share also some of the things that she said in the interview about the framework of their group.
Right. Sure, sure. I'd be happy to do that. And I just was going to put in there, who wouldn't want to belong to a group like that? Who wouldn't want to have that kind of support? I can think of so many ways that it would just fulfill everything, that we would need. Right? Wow.
Right.
Okay. So here are some just suggestions for a framework for your JPS group. They're only suggestions, and you can set it up in whatever way fits best for your group, but just bare bones here. Determine where the group can meet. You can contact churches and other Christian organizations about posting information regarding your group. You can make up a little pamphlet if you want, or you could send out an email and just inform Christian organizations and churches in your area that you have this group and you're available. And of course, you could also have somebody who's maybe a little bit techy post some announcements via social media, just to start off and lay the foundation.
Yeah. And I think also we want to mention, obviously, if you're listening to this, maybe you feel that you're not the kind of person to start a group. Maybe you want to find a friend to start it with, or find somebody you think would be good. But we want to encourage you, you don't need to be a leadership type to start this group. It's more of a facilitator position, really. In fact, having the leadership type might be a detriment
Mhm.
if they're the kind that kind of tells people what to do and orders people around. That's not going to be very supportive. So just try and think a little bit out of the box if you're the kind of person that thinks, oh, I'm not that type of person who starts a group.
Or somebody who figures you don't have the time or the effort's too much, but you can use two are better than one. So yeah, you can use other people to support you where you may have a deficit or they do, right? Yeah.
Right. You don't have to do it alone.
No.
Okay. Possible structures of the meeting. So one of the things that Therese shared was they started the meeting with a potluck. I think that was really a wise thing to come together. So they had this meal. Everybody came and they brought everybody contributed, and then they sat and had a meal together. And it was during the week. So people, maybe they were at a job or whatever it was they were doing. It was a time for them to just have a meal and just converse and talk about how their week was going and what was going on in their life before they dove into the rest of the meeting. And probably also gave them a chance to talk and meet new people that were in the group or catch up on what's been happening. I think that's like a great way to start.
I agree. There's nothing like sitting down and sharing a meal together.
Then she said that and this is obviously probably a really good thing, that after the meal, they were sharing things that happened during the week, maybe issues that they had going on,
Mhm.
and then they would all hold hands and gather in the living room, and then they would pray. And they would pray to ask the Holy Spirit to come, but they would also be praying for other people's needs in the group or situations that they needed praying for. Then, so they also would share when they were blessed, give praises, things like that. Then I think you could share testimonies, good or bad, prayer requests, somebody you met that you wanted to ask prayer for, expressions of gratitude. Then I think another thing is to maybe even think about solutions, discussing one sister has a need and people in the group, as they're praying about it, asking God to give them ideas about solutions for whatever that issue is, that need is.
Well, certainly, again, more brains, more more ideas, and just the whole idea of being supported by many or more can certainly help.
And then beyond that, you can decide whether you want to do a Bible study, whether you want to make it a group, like we're going to all learn to play instruments, or we're going to go walking, or we're going to do some kind of fitness thing, or we're going to do some kind of service. But I would say all those things honestly should be secondary. The big thing is being there for one another, to share and to pray and to try and serve one another in whatever way. And then what you do together after that is kind of secondary.
Right. Yeah, the icing on the cake. Yeah.
The big thing we want to say is that it can be set up like a Bible study or small group, as far as when you meet, how you're going to find people, connecting with other people. But the group itself is going to be different. It's going to be like creating a family. I think it's a better way to look at it. You're going to meet with your family as time goes by, not going there and feeling awkward, not going there, not being able to talk to anybody, coming and going unknown, right?
Right.
So I think one of the big things is we want it to be a safe group. And in order to have a safe group, the members have to be safe people. So the group culture that we really want to cultivate is it's a safe group with safe people, and that has to be established at the start of the group.
Right.
Realize whatever group you have, every group anywhere has a culture. Every
Mhm.
organization, every church, they all have a culture. You can either choose what it's going to be and strive for that, or you can just let it happen. And I think the let it happen usually doesn't work very well. It's not a positive culture.
Right. Establishing those first boundaries, guidelines is really imperative to setting the tone of what the group will be like. Much of what we were sharing today was gleaned from the book Safe People by Henry Cloud and John Townsend, and A Church Called Tove by Scott McKnight and Laura Barringer. And in Safe People, Cloud and Townsend wrote, the best example of a safe person is found in Jesus. In him, we found the three qualities of a safe person: dwelling, grace, and truth. Dwelling refers to someone's ability to connect with us, being truly present and relating to one another, being empathetic. The quality of grace means that someone is on our side and they are there for us. And truth implies many things, but in relationships, it implies honesty, being real with one another, and living out the truth of God. According to Cloud and Townsend, true safe relationships are ones where we can speak the truth to one another, confronting each other as needed. Grace, in the absence of condemnation, allows us to do this with less fear than would occur in a condemning relationship.
Yes.
Mm.
We all long for these type of relationships in our lives.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we're not open to them.
Right.
One, we've all been hurt, and life just seems easier and safer in some ways if we're just self-sufficient and we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable to other people. In episode 2 of our podcast, we shared about loneliness and social isolation and how that hurts us physically.
Mhm.
It increases the likelihood of all kinds of illnesses, especially dementia. That was the scary
Big
one.
one. Right.
50% greater risk of dementia. It shortens our lives. That's probably because our loving Father never meant for any of us to do life alone. He meant for us to love and care for one another, and love means sacrifice. Love costs us, but the reward of loving relationships will always outweigh the costs. So, in order to establish a safe culture for JPS support group, we need to understand what that looks like. So, we're going to talk about safe and unsafe people. This information we gleaned from, again, the Safe People book by Townsend and Henry Cloud and Townsend. Yeah. So, we're just going to go through description of what are unsafe and safe people.
Well, we're going to start off with unsafe people. And unsafe people can be categorized, into three groups: abandoners, critics, and irresponsibles. True about others, true about ourselves. Traits of unsafe people. Unsafe people think they have it all together instead of admitting their weaknesses. They're not vulnerable and open and willing to share those things that are going wrong. Unsafe people are religious instead of spiritual. And I think this is the whole thing that turns us really off from the church and from Christians in general, is when they are religious about certain things, and then they're hypocritical. We like to see spiritual and someone who is engaged in a relationship with the Lord. Unsafe people are defensive instead of open to feedback, which is what I just said. And those people that you wouldn't dare say something to, or make a suggestion, because you just know they aren't going to be somebody that will take your suggestion to heart, for one thing, and not, strike back at you or something like that. So unsafe people are self-righteous instead of humble. And we've all met them, and probably at times we've been them ourselves. But if they are continuously unable to take any kind of contradiction or any kind of questioning, or then there's somebody probably to avoid, because they're not going to be able to be a good contributor to your group. Unsafe people only apologize instead of changing their behavior. It's kind of like the boy that called out wolf, right? Yeah, you can only believe them for so long if they don't actually have a change in their behavior. Unsafe people avoid working on their problems instead of dealing with them. Yep. Unsafe people demand trust instead of earning it. Not too. Unsafe people believe they are perfect instead of admitting their faults. Again, I think, yeah, they just self-righteous and they just are unable to or just don't want to
Yeah, a
admit
lot of these things are interconnected.
yeah, it's sort of
Like,
back and forth. Yeah. Unsafe people blame others instead of taking responsibility. And we all know those who say, yes, but I did do that, but you did this, those sort of things. Sometimes we just have to fess up and take responsibility for making the mistake. Unsafe people lie instead of telling the truth. Some people say, oh, that was just a little white lie. That was just something that, but we have to really work hard at telling the truth and everything. It can be difficult, but those who lie consistently, you can't rely on them and they have no integrity. Unsafe people are stagnant instead of growing. I think this is a really important one. If you aren't taking steps forward, if you aren't willing to accept that you have some areas of growth, some areas of need. We always will have that. We'll never be perfect. It's good to have somebody hold us accountable, and it's good to step forward and keep trying and growing and not to stay stagnant. We are capable of doing that. It's just some people, they just like to stay right where they are and never move forward. They can be very difficult to deal with in a group that's trying to improve and get better and looking for forward movement.
yeah. What's important is about these descriptions of unsafe people is that we're all unsafe people at different times.
Right.
So when we read these things, we can probably all say, remember a time when we were self-righteous instead of humble. We can remember a time
Mhm.
when we were blaming others instead of taking responsibility. We've all done that.
Mhm.
So the point is not to be conscious of that and not be that. Because when you are that, you are not safe. Probably the last one about being stagnant instead of growing. I think that's especially true of older people. We
Mhm.
tend to, we reached a certain point where we're like, well, I'm just who I am. And older, I don't really want to ever challenge myself anymore, right? We're always looking for the easy way.
Well, take it or leave it. I am what I am.
Yeah, and we
You
want it
know.
when things are winding down. I'm looking for comfort now for my life to
Right.
just kind of coast to the end.
Right.
But the thing is that there's
Mm.
just no such thing. You cannot
Yeah.
you cannot stay where you are. If you try to stay where you are sliding backwards,
Mhm.
right? You always have to be growing.
Right. And there's a wonderful freedom in that too. It's a freedom to grow and to learn something new and a freedom to when it even helps you with a connection with other things in your life and younger people as well. It keeps you open-minded and able to learn more, I think, as well. So,
Right.
yeah.
And it keeps away dementia again. You're supposed to be learning new things. This is like one of the best ways to fight dementia is to be learning new things, doing new things, interacting with people, is not to just stay with whatever you're doing now because
Right.
your brain just dies.
Mhm.
God did not create your brain for that.
Right.
He did create your brain to look for the easiest thing. It does do that, but not to just not work anymore.
Right. Right. Not just lock yourself up in the house and just not reach out or do anything.
Yeah.
We're still called to disciple. We're still called to be of service. We're still called to community. Yeah.
Okay, so let's describe what safe people are. And this is a little bit different because we're following what was in the book Safe People by Cloud and Townsend. And they gave three qualities, I guess, to look for. Basically, it's based on Jesus because he's the ultimate safe person. One is safe people draw you closer to God. They draw you closer to other people and they help you to become the real person God created you to be. That's the kind of people we want to be around, right? That
Yeah.
we feel closer to God, we feel closer to others, and we feel like we're becoming more and more the person God made us to be. I mean, that's the ultimate. So then the next thing is, okay, so how do we be safe people? Because I think we can all acknowledge we all have some of those characteristics of unsafe people that we just went through. At least at some point, at some time, we all behave in unsafe ways. So some of the things that they gave in the book was learn to receive forgiveness and learn to give forgiveness. But before we go on to the group, I think we need to I mean, how that would function in a group, is to give a definition of what forgiveness is, because there's all kinds of definitions out there. And I know for me, it's a particular subject that I've had to deal with people a lot of telling me what forgiveness is, telling me what I was supposed to do as far as what encompasses forgiveness. Do you have anything you want to share on that? I know what I want to share.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So, and my understanding of forgiveness is from Matthew 18:21 through 35. And it talks about the servant whose master forgave him a huge debt. And then it's actually a parable about if God forgives us so much, then we should forgive others. So it's the encouragement to forgive others. But I want us to focus on exactly what forgiveness is in this passage, is that then the servant went out, and then other people who owed him money, and he went to them and grabbed them and said, pay me back, or I'm going to throw you in prison. He didn't forgive their debt, and they owed him a lot less. And so then the master found out that this wicked servant did that, and because the other people told him, and then, he threw him into jail. But the point I want to make, or the definition, is the forgiveness was you forgave a debt. You didn't require someone to pay you what you were owed. And so that's what forgiveness is. It isn't reconciliation. It isn't you've forgotten completely that they ever owed you anything. It would include that you don't go to that person and keep reminding them that they once owed you and you've forgiven them. But it's that you no longer require that person to pay you for whatever it was. And it has nothing to do with you ever talk to that person again, if that person was ever sorry, if they ever repented. Forgiveness is completely separate from that. It's only about saying, I am not going to require this person to pay me anything in whatever form for whatever they did to me. I'm going to let go of that. And it's not even letting them off the hook of they did something terrible to you and they have no sorrow over it, because God says vengeance is mine. So you let him take care of it, because he knows so much better than we do. So forgiveness is just forgiving the debt, not taking revenge, not trying to get that person to pay you back. You just say, I forgive it. You have any comments on that, Janine?
No, no,
Okay.
not at all.
Okay.
No.
But as far as this group that we're talking about being safe people in a group, the learn to receive forgiveness and learn to give forgiveness, it does go a little bit further than that, because you're in this group with people and you do need to try and have a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they've described it this way as learn to receive and learn to give forgiveness, it is adding to it the meaning. So as far as learn to receive forgiveness, I think we can all, if we haven't experienced it ourselves, we probably know people who have done something and they regret it and they've asked forgiveness, but then they never really receive it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're always trying to make up for it, or they always feel like somebody never really forgave them. And so that's a way to be a safe person, is that when someone says they've forgiven you, is to accept that they have and move on that way. Then, of course, learn to give forgiveness, like in the parable, is letting go of being willing to let go of what somebody may have done to you
Mm-hmm.
or may have hurt you, letting go of that. Give something back. So, and then they have learn your friends' need signals, ask to help people, be there for people, tell the truth. And number 5 was go into the world and find opportunities to help the lonely, the oppressed, and the less fortunate. And I think that's definitely the description of safe people. They are all those things, right? They are not thinking of just themselves. They are thinking of others. They are servants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
So when you say learn your friends' need signals, what does that encompass?
If anybody's here was a mom, you have children and they have needs, and you had to figure out, especially if they were infants or they were toddlers and they couldn't really tell you, okay, what is it that they need? They've got a wet diaper, or they're hungry, or they're lonely, or whatever it is. And we have so much more capability. As you get to know somebody, you can start to see, okay, this person needs to be alone
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. They need a break from all these people. Or this person needs to get out and needs to have some fun, needs to get away from all the stress that they're under. Or this person needs to talk, or this person doesn't need to talk, right? It's basically, as you get to know people, is I mean, it really comes down to being others focused.
Mm. Okay.
Now, of course, we all have our own needs that need to be met, and we want to promote that in this group, but we can't all come into the group looking for our own needs to be met and not meeting the needs of others. It's got to be mutual,
Mhm.
right? It's got to be this mutuality. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the other book that I read in thinking about these support groups was a church called Tove. And both of these books I highly recommend. In this book, it's really about church cultures, but it was also about if you're in a church, especially if you're in a big church,
Mhm.
it's really hard to do anything about the culture of the whole church, but you can create a group, your own group within that church that is a Tove culture. And Tove means good or goodness in the Bible.
Hmm.
Right. And so in that book, in as far as creating a goodness or Tove culture, is that you want a group that nurtures empathy, nurtures grace, nurtures a people first culture, nurtures truth, nurtures justice, service, and Christ-likeness. Maybe it's like a good idea to like put all those things up as like your core values for your group.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And I think the empathy one very important. That's interesting that they put that first.
Yeah, because empathy is so much more than sympathy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I hope in what we're discussing that the listeners can hear what this kind of group is supposed to be. That
Right.
culture that is safe, it's empathetic, it's people first, it's Jesus first, it's being like Jesus, it's loving one another. And it goes back again to that statement that Therese made, loving one another to wholeness.
Hmm.
Because I think if we have relationships, a group like that, then it is life changing as it was for Therese. It could be life changing for all of us. Because whatever reason, maybe the enemy or our own selfishness or the way that our society is, there aren't many groups like that. We all long for it, but we also don't want to pay the price for it.
Exactly. Hmm.
So I hope our listeners really think about it because you're paying the price anyway. If you don't have that group, you're paying a very high price. And whatever you're paying to have a group like that, you will be rewarded a hundredfold.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now we get to the part about, when groups are messy.
Right.
What do you do when you have disputes or challenges in a group? There are going to be probably people, I hope it's few and far between, but it could happen. There are people who actually enter a group to take advantage of it
Hmm.
because they want to scam people or they want to make a name for themselves or control other people. So we have to be on the lookout for them. So all these things we have to discuss. But some people, and this is probably all of us because we all have blind spots, just have certain things that we do that are not good and that we need help overcoming. And we can do that in loving ways to love one another, right? And again, this is like loving one another to wholeness, to overcoming a lot of those things. Over 50, all of us are coming with some kind of hurt, some kind of baggage, some attitudes, beliefs that are not correct. And so all of these things we're all going to have to come and work on them
Yep. Hmm.
as you're going into this, and this now kind of more directed towards people who are the facilitators of the group, although probably everyone should have a say, but there's got to be someone who's kind of like overseeing it so that they can intervene when things happen. The question to ask again is this a safe group? Are people being safe? And are they willing to change?
Hmm.
Because probably all of us are going to act in unsafe ways at some point. We're going to talk about some of those behaviors and then also in the sense of identifying toxic people. I think as we go through this list, we need to keep in mind that you need to observe behaviors over time and you need to give people a chance to change and being willing, everyone in the group being willing to help that person change. So it's a matter, are they going to just defend themselves and not being willing to change and not being humble, all those kind of things? Then that's when it's like, okay, there's a place we can't move forward. But you want to give a lot of grace for a person to change. You don't want to just kick somebody out right away from your group
Right.
because you might end up with nobody because we all have issues. Okay. So moving forward, Janine, you want to mention some of these things and we'll just discuss what they are. Give a quick.
Sure. I'll Tap in where I can. Sure. Yeah. So the first one, extreme attention seekers. Yeah, they are people that draw attention to themselves. And again, Ellie, just like you said, they don't have to be, it would be some, it's over time. You observe this over time, and they just come in and they disturb the group with consistently needing attention. And this can be draining. We all have seasons, but someone to be on the lookout is someone who is just wants the spotlight and maybe is a little dramatic and is really looking for either accolades or some kind of attention. Yeah.
Yeah. I see this a lot, actually. I've seen this a lot with certain people who come in and they just start to expound on whatever it is and they monopolize the time.
Mhm.
Now,
Right.
sometimes there are people who are, maybe they're going and they're in a season where they're totally overwhelmed and all kinds of terrible stuff is happening and they need to talk about it. But some people, that's what they do, right? It's going to take a little bit of a wisdom and discernment in that, but you can't let that go on. Next one was gossipers. This is a difficult one because, again, people have different definitions of gossip. I would put it to if somebody is saying something, and then you could chime in here, Janine,
Hmm.
negative or yeah, negative about someone else. They don't even have to be in the group. Okay. It could be about a local pastor at another church. Is if it has no bearing, something like that that has nothing to do with the group, nothing to do with what you're doing. It's just gossip. We just don't need that. Now, maybe in an outside conversation, if there was something you were supposed to do about it, then you could talk about it outside the group. But definitely, if somebody is saying bad things about somebody else in the group behind their back, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it just becomes part of the culture, and people then just come to
Yeah.
eat and talk about others.
Yeah,
Great.
backbiting, that definitely has to be dealt with. You can't have that going on. You want to talk about the next one?
Yeah, sure. Spreading hate can be, somebody comes in with an opinion, and it could be anything from they don't like men, they don't like the government, they don't like the price of gas, but it's and they're just, or even a person in the community or something like that, and they continuously just spread hate. They just continuously are negative, and they just like to, feed off of everyone's anxiety and try to stir things up. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You can include racism in there. That's not acceptable whatsoever.
Uh,
Sometimes they're more subtle. I think I told Janine before about I was in a group. It was a mom's group, so this is going way back. And one of the moms hated President Clinton. So that's telling you how old this was. How long ago she hated President Clinton, and every time the mom's play group would get together, she just talked about how much she couldn't stand him, and she was just ooh, seething with anger. Now, I didn't like President Clinton either, but it was just like totally unproductive.
mhm.
It just didn't go anywhere and there was no purpose. And we were stuck with him being president at that point. So it just made it put a damper on everything. It's like it was not a positive experience. So that's like kind of spreading hate too, I think. It's like
Right.
it's not productive because we are supposed to hate sin, right? But
Right.
I think if we just sit there and talk about all the sin that we hate and people who are doing it, it's just not productive. Maybe one comment, that's it, right?
Yes. Well, we could say a lot about some political things here in Canada at the time, but maybe we won't.
Right. Okay. Maybe you could do it on your own time, right? You get together with a friend and you want to discuss politics or something. Okay. Disruptive. That kind of comes along with like the extreme attention seeking, right? People, it's really a form of attention seeking. And sometimes it's just being inconsiderate. Somebody who always comes 15 minutes late,
Mhm.
makes a lot of noise, and they're doing some talks really loud, interrupts people. That's all very disruptive. That's a thing where you would probably, if that kept happening, is to talk to that person about it.
Right. Yeah, and I think the passive aggressive, you have a pretty good definition of that. So share that with us, the passive aggressive person.
Yeah, yeah, and I have to say, I think. I think most of us have are passive aggressive at some point because most people don't want to, we're conflict avoidant, right?
Hmm.
And so if you're not sure what passive aggressive means, it's, I think maybe an example is good, is that let's say somebody says something that hurts your feelings,
Hmm.
but you do not want to go and tell them. How often have we had somebody and maybe ourselves gone to a friend, come to you and said, so and so said this and it hurt my feelings or that was mean, and say, have you told them about it? And they're like, no, I can't tell them. Now, sometimes Matthew 18 is not appropriate, like in situations where there's abuse, etc., or somebody who has power over you. It's not, you should not use Matthew 18. But the point is that the passive aggressive is a person who will not tell somebody that they're hurt or that they don't want to do something. Maybe they're asked to bring a dessert to the next meeting and they are not good at making desserts or they don't have any time to do it. But instead of saying no, they're just this resentment builds. Somebody's doing something that hurt them or keeps doing something that annoys them, but they never say it. They just let the resentment build. And
Hmm.
so what happens is this, so that's that passive aggressive, is that you cannot stuff that forever.
Right.
That resentment is going to show up at some point. And for the passive person, often how it shows up is you don't come out and say something absolutely mean or tell the person that they hurt you, which is what you should have done, is that you make snide little comments or you represent them not in the best light to other people, or you start saying, I'm not coming to the group anymore, things like that. And that's all due to a passive aggressive behavior. Again, I think for women and especially, well, I don't want to say especially older women, but I think if we've been doing it for 50 years, it can be pretty bad.
Hmm.
It's something that I think God really wants us to grow in, is to speak the truth in love. And it's hard. It's hard to do it. I'm not saying it isn't.
Okay. Yeah.
So that pass, you need to call, I guess the point is you need to call that out. You'll see it because all of a sudden somebody doesn't talk as much and their behavior, it'll show up because you could just not hide it after a while.
Hmm. That's true. Yeah.
So the
Okay.
next one is cause other group members to shut down.
Right.
That is, let's say Mary shares, I'm going to go to a ball game on Friday and I'm going to wear a hat and blah, 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 whatever it is she's going to do. And then the next person next to her says, well, I wouldn't do that. That's stupid. Right? Well, you
Hmm.
have whoever, let's say it's Betty said that about Mary's idea. She has now shut down Mary. Why would
Right.
Mary ever share again any idea or plan that she ever had? Because you just told her she's stupid.
Right.
That's shutting people down. Can you give another example? Because I know we have other examples of that.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just thinking sometimes people are in different emotional states. You may be talking about something matter of fact, and a person may be sharing some heartfelt tragedy that they're involved in or something, and you just somebody makes an off the cuff remark like, let's have dinner soon or something, while that person is in the middle of sharing about an emotional experience that they're going through. That would be just
Yeah,
maybe enough for them never to want to pipe up again. Right.
right. Complete lack of empathy. I've seen that in a group too.
Hmm.
Somebody sobbing,
Right.
and another person just trying to get them to be quiet so they
Right.
can move on because they were
Right.
uncomfortable.
Sure. Yeah. Or they want to go home.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
That's shutting people down too. The next one is pretty obvious. It's foul-mouthed, but it's also negative. So
Hmm.
negative speech is always negative. That your culture, your whole group, is everybody going to be negative.
Hmm.
And don't be surprised if people don't want to come anymore.
Right. Right.
Everybody
Yeah.
gets depressed and like, nobody wants that. It affects everybody. The foul mouth part, I especially dislike because it's so prevalent in our culture now. People just in normal conversation, every other word is some kind of profanity.
Hmm.
But I feel like even Christians, especially younger Christians, are like, well, it's just words. And I'm like, oh, it's not just words.
Hmm.
Our words have effect, right? Our
Hmm.
words are
Yeah.
powerful. I mean, if you just ask yourself, would you want to be cussed out by somebody?
Hmm.
Nobody would.
No.
What it does to you to have somebody cuss you out. Well, how much different is it if you're just hearing somebody cuss constantly?
Right.
It has a power, right?
Hmm.
So that would not be acceptable.
No.
Yeah.
And there's something really refreshing being in a group where people watch what they say. It's comforting, and it's a wholesome environment to share with. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I do want to give one thing though, is that I know I've worked with a lot of women and had friends that have gone through maybe a difficult divorce. They've gone through, they're being dragged through the mud and they've been really hurt and put down, and they will use some profanity as they're
Sometimes.
describing
Yeah.
it. And you know what? That's
Yeah.
okay.
Hmm.
I would not go after a person that, because
No.
that
No.
is part of
No.
their processing of that
Mhm.
situation. So that's okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just that it's not something that's there, all the time and consistently and yeah, with no seeming starting point, right? There's
Right.
nothing happening. Right.
Okay. Next one was express attitudes that diminish the value of women. Okay, so this was this was mine. I just want to share. I used to be in a very conservative stream of Christianity that I experienced a lot of women as being less valuable than men.
Mhm.
My daughter has said how, not from me, but from the people we were around, it would be very depressing, and that she felt like she wasn't much she could do with her life if she had to accept that she had to be the second class citizen in the world. And that was her lot in life because of the people that we hung around. That's very damaging.
Mhm.
If in your group you have someone who's always talking about women as if they're second class and men are first class, I think that it would be very, very negative. I would not let that go on, because then again, that's negative.
Mhm.
And words have power, attitude, ideas have consequences. That will really be depressing to everybody in the group. Now, you may have people, and it's their conviction, women have certain roles. They might not say that women are second class, but they have certain roles and there's only certain things that they can do, and that's their conviction. And maybe some other people in the group have that, or maybe they don't. But there could be just different convictions in the group among people. And in that case, you might want to suggest that that person start their own group. Because if it's enough of a difference of beliefs or convictions that are going to affect the group, maybe it's better to start two different groups. And I think of like Barnabas and Paul.
Mhm.
They disagreed about bringing John Mark on their journey, and Barnabas separated and took John Mark, and Paul went and took someone else with him. And so there ended up being two journeys, two missionary journeys. It's the same
Mhm.
thing. So you could just have two different groups and just accept that one group has a certain belief or conviction and that the other group doesn't have. And that's okay.
Mhm.
But that would need to be discussed, because if you're finding that it's a problem for your group because of this difference in convictions.
Right.
You want to discuss the next one?
Well, I think toxic positivity sort of speaks for itself. But yeah, toxic positivity, we all know those people that are over the top bubbly, over the top, maybe unrealistic, or everything is great, everything is fine. There's not a lot of people like that, but it can bounce into your group. It can sort of come across as we all have to all be happy, joyful, positive Christians all the time and everything is great. It actually leads into a lack of authenticity, a lack of being real, a lack of saying how it is. We need people that in the group that can acknowledge that life is messy, relationships are messy, things are not ideal all the time. Although we need to be positive and not negative, in that we consistently try to have no hope. We need hope, but we don't need toxic positivity. We just need people to be real. And
Yeah,
I think that
right,
that probably
right.
says it
So,
all, unless
so the,
you have something.
I mean, we're supposed to be encouraging one another, but the
Right,
toxic positivity is when you do not allow a person to share their heart, share their hurts,
right.
share their struggles,
Hmm.
share when they do feel like I don't feel God or I feel abandoned by God. So they are
Hmm.
expressing their heart.
Right.
And you say, well, that's right from the devil. Now, sometimes it is appropriate to say that to somebody. I'm not going to say you can never say that. But when you're listening for someone's heart, to hear them so they can feel safe, right?
Hmm.
You're a safe person. You do not just make it so that person can never ever say anything negative, never express any sadness, never express any struggles, never express any doubts. That is
Hmm.
toxic positivity.
Right.
When you make that person can only be positive,
Hmm.
okay? That's toxic. That is unhealthy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last one that we have on our list, and there's more, we're just giving ones that we think are probably common that you might likely encounter in your group, is lack of authenticity. This is probably rampant in the church, right?
Right, right, absolutely. You just see those people that they put on the happy smile and everything is great and it's just inauthentic
Right,
and not what we need to be wearing. We need to be showing that we are vulnerable and real.
right.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
don't all, none of us have it all together.
No, that's for sure.
It's even the person that if you think in your mind of the person you think has the best life ever, right?
Right.
Whoever you can think of, they've got it all.
Hmm.
They don't.
No.
They have, everybody has trials and secret wishes and things that are wrong and things that have happened and hurts in their life
Mhm.
because we live in a fallen world. So it's best, God made us to be sharing all those things. And I have experienced in church, not so much in the last, I 10 years or so, but I'll still see it in certain circles of, the Christian that has the perfect family, the perfect marriage. It's all together. We're all together. They don't really show their weaknesses
Mhm.
or where they don't have it all together. And that's really sad. I really feel sorry for those people because you don't really have any friends. You're not being honest because your friends
Well, yeah,
not friends
exactly.
if they can't
Yeah.
know that you don't have anyone to share your weaknesses with.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that there's a time where you don't need to share everything with everybody all the time either. You don't
Oh,
need to
right.
be right. I mean,
Absolutely.
obviously, but but you sure do need to share when you're in a Jesus People Sisterhood group because that helps build the friendships and helps build the trust and helps others to get closer to you and develop those relationships. Yeah.
Right. And that brings up topic that these groups need to be confidential.
Exactly.
Right. So when you're sharing in that group, you don't go outside that group and tell everybody what somebody shared.
Hmm. Hmm.
Unless it's like, innocuous.
Right.
Joanne's moving on Saturday and you're trying to find people to help her move. I mean, that's
Exactly.
okay, right?
Of course,
Just
yeah.
just use common sense there. So the point is, okay, so all of these different things, you're going to observe those behaviors over time. If somebody does something once, depending on the behavior, you might not say anything. Obviously, if somebody shuts someone down in a group, you might want to deal with that right then, right?
Right.
Because they did it in front of everybody and it was hurtful. And again, that depends on how they did it. If somebody is foul-mouthed, you might ask them right there, can you please refrain from using profanity, things like that. Some of them you might observe, and then after the meeting is over, go to that person privately and say something and ask
Hmm.
how you can help them. And then it also should be, how can I help you? How can I pray for you? Let's pray together. Some of them you might see if they keep doing it. Like maybe they were disruptive at one meeting, but maybe they aren't disruptive at every meeting. And so it's after you observe those behaviors over time that you want to go and speak to that person and you're going to give them a chance to change their behavior. And you need to be able to tell them exactly what the behavior is, right? So you may have to write it down, especially if you're waiting over time. And then this is where, if the person is unwilling or they say they're willing, but they don't seem to be trying at all,
Hmm.
that's when you have to start praying about asking them to leave the group
Hmm.
because that is creating the culture again. And the culture that you're trying to create is safe, that's
Hmm.
empathetic, that's caring, that's Christ-like. And if you allow people in the group who have those kind of behaviors and they consistently exhibit those behaviors, that's not the group you're going to have. It's not going to be a safe place. And people aren't going to be growing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
Also, if there is a behavior that is particularly egregious or offensive, then again, you want to address that immediately and maybe even that not wait to ask that person to leave. I don't know. Like I'm thinking if somebody was a racist, I don't know that I wouldn't ask them to leave the group because I
Mhm.
don't know. I mean, obviously people can overcome that. I'm not saying they can't. I guess I would leave it up to you, whoever it is leading the group, to decide how they wanted to deal with that. I'm not sure how I'd deal with it. I guess I would have to wait to see the person because if you talk to them about it and see what their reaction is. Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Anything
Yeah,
else
so
you
there's
want to share that
right. So
you
those are just some suggestions for those toxic people, for those behaviors to be on the lookout for. Yeah. For the
Okay.
group, okay, for the group to flourish, it must be a safe place to share and people need to be vulnerable. We talked about some strict confidentiality. That is absolutely imperative. If you can't have the confidentiality, you can't have the trust, and the group will never gel together. It is the intention to build each other up in the Lord with the emotional, spiritual, and practical help, especially that practical help, which we all so need, especially being single and not necessarily having that extra set of hands or even an extra just set of someone just to bounce some suggestions or ideas off of.
Okay. The other thing is like if you need help in solving a grievance, you may need to split the group, which we mentioned earlier for there's convictions, different convictions. But
Right.
you have certain grievances, you can contact us. Now we can't promise that we can solve all your issues, especially because we're not there.
Right.
But cover everything in prayer, continually seek the Lord's guidance, and I trust that God's going to help you and take care of you because I believe that He's definitely wants His daughters to be in committed friendships like this, to be doing life together.
Right. And if someone reports some type of criminal activity, say my adult children are abusing me, there is some information that obviously doesn't need to remain confidential, and you'll need to report those sort of incidences to the proper authorities. Safety should be the top priority for all of your group members, and you certainly want to take care of that situation right away.
Okay. Well, I hope all that we've shared is all these suggestions and information is giving you some ideas of how you can start a group and how you would run that group. I would recommend listening to the interview with Therese from the last episode to just get a feel what it could be like. Okay, so to be helpful to those sisters wanting to start a group, and we strongly encourage that you do, we provided some suggestions and possible framework for leading a Jesus People Sisterhood group. Each group will be the sole responsibility of the leader and its members, and not the Jesus People Sisterhood podcast or its hosts. Although group leaders may contact Jesus People Sisterhood for advice on running their group, Jesus People Sisterhood will not control or assume any liability for any Jesus People Sisterhood community group. Our one request for each group is that they adhere to the tenets of the Christian faith and treat all members with respect and dignity if they choose to use the Jesus People Sisterhood name or be associated with the Jesus People Sisterhood community. I want to thank you all for listening today. Please let us know if you would like to start a group. If you have questions, you can contact us at support@jesuspeoplesisterhood.com.
Join the JPS Community Private Facebook group. Please add a comment letting us know if you've started a JPS Community Support group. If you haven't, start reaching out to other sisters in your community to create your own group. Please let us know about that group, and we'll start a directory of Jesus People Sisterhood groups. Contact us at support@jesuspeoplesisterhood.com.
Have you had a good experience with a business? They've treated you honestly and helped you at a reasonable price? Please let us know. We would like to start a directory of JPS-friendly businesses. Let's care for one another.
That's all we have for today, sisters. Be blessed by Him who is able to protect you from stumbling and to make you stand in the presence of His glory, blameless and with great joy. Bye for now.
Hey, sister, before you go, thank you for listening. If you found value in today's podcast, the best way to say thank you is by leaving a 5-star written review at Apple Podcasts. That raises us in the rankings and helps other sisters find us too. And please tell a friend or post it on your social media. If you're a single Christian woman over 50, this podcast was created specifically for you. The Jesus People Sisterhood is your community to find support and friendship with other sisters who can understand. Be sure to follow us on your podcast app and join our free private Facebook group at Jesus People Sisterhood Community.
Jesus People Sisterhood has also started a private Facebook group for housing and co-living opportunities. You can check that out at Jesus People Sisterhood Senior Housing. You can also find us on Facebook at Jesus People Sisterhood and individually for Janine at riseupcoachingandconsulting.com and for Ellie at samaramountain.com. And ladies, this is the necessary disclaimer. Our podcast content is for informational purposes and does not constitute professional advice for mental health, medical, legal, financial, or other areas. The opinions of the guest do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host. It is our heart that this podcast will be a blessing to you. Together, let's build a powerful sisterhood with Jesus. Make a friend, add a sister, across the border and around the world.